one-sided, as they claim, visit to Israel soon after the Hezbollah invasion. If you feel like you would like to sign this letter, we would be very, very grateful if you could sign it and let me know. My contact details are on it. Of course, it's just for the members of parliament. Consider it, and please pass it on to your colleagues who are not here. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now from my side, I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Schindler, our guest today. He's Senior Director at Counter-Extremism Project, CEP, and he has an extensive knowledge in security studies. His work has high relevance for decision makers, not only here in Berlin, also in the United States, in the Homeland Authorities, if I'm well informed, and in the United Nations. So you will start with the keynote, but before I would like to welcome also our second guest, Mr. Arabi, who is director at United Against Nuclear Iran. We heard about it, and non-resident scholar at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. You're very welcome. Happy to be that you are with us. You're expert in Iranian Revolutionary Guards and Shiite terrorism, so we will have a second input from your side after Dr. Schindler. A little later, we will welcome Mr. Sagui. He will join us. He's Minister of the Israeli Embassy here in Germany, and we will have the opportunity to hear his evaluation of the current situation in Israel and Gaza. Two little things from my side before we start. You're free to ask your questions in both German or English, and we will make sure that it will be translated if needed. And second, Mr. Bradley mentioned already, we are pleased to have a group of journalists among us. So if you want to ask something off the record, please let us know in advance. Okay, Dr. Schindler, the floor is yours.
Vielen Dank, Herr Abgeordneter. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to brief in English because the other two briefers will also speak in English, but of course, please feel free to ask your questions in German. Ich habe rudimentäre Kenntnisse der deutschen Sprache. So, thank you so much for the invitation to Oliver and Ms. Rosenstein and our colleagues from the Middle East Freedom Forum. Just a couple of sentences about the Counter-Extremism Project. It's a transatlantic think tank and advocacy organization headquartered in New York, but we also have a large European presence a couple of meters from here at Pariser Platz. So we are at your disposal beyond the aspect of what we're talking about today, which of course is Hamas. We are looking at the entire spectrum of what we call ideologically motivated violence. That means we are starting at the extreme violence-oriented right-wing extremism and then go through the ideological spectrum all the way to the topic we are talking today, Islamist terrorism. Rather than giving a long presentation, I was asked to give ample space for Q&A and also be conscious of the fact that there are three briefers, so I'm not going to do my usual long-winded talks. I just want to make a couple of points. First, I'm going to highlight a little bit why the ideology and the genesis of Hamas is an important point to keep in mind in order to ascertain how much and how severe the threat beyond the Gaza Strip is going to be and will remain for the foreseeable future. I will talk then a little bit about the structure of Hamas and why this is actually good news and a known problem set when it comes to countering. And then I'm going to make three general points on where I see political action, both in Germany as well as on the level of the European Union, is urgently needed and should be undertaken right now. So let's first look at the ideology of Hamas. Hamas originally, as you may be aware, was founded in the framework of the first Intifada. So we're talking about the end of the 1980s as officially the arm of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood in the Gaza Strip. That's how the organization originated. If you're looking at the basic document that Hamas put out in August 1988, you will find this exactly pointed out. We are the arm of the Muslim Brotherhood, which in the overall structure of the Muslim Brotherhood is the origin of the global network and still one of the central parts of the global network of the Muslim Brotherhood. Why is this important? Because the Muslim Brotherhood is not addressing primarily issues concerning the Palestinian cause or two-state or one-state solution. It is actually trying to work to reshape the entire political system globally. It is asking for the foundation, by peaceful means, mind you, at least officially, of a global caliphate. Eventually, that not only unites the Ummah, but also Islamicizes the entire world. That's why the ideological origin of Hamas, by its logic within its own ideology, cannot just be focused on the Israeli question and the Palestinian territories. It has, at least in the second step, global ambitions. There was, of course, a statement in 2017 called a political program, which was supposed to augment the basic tenets that were put out in 1988, and there was a long, really serious discussion whether this is a sign that Hamas is somewhat accepting the two-state solution, somewhat accepting Israel in the borders of 1967. I think that argument is clearly laid to rest from the 7th of October 2023 onwards. You cannot slaughter civilians, women and children and babies while you fundamentally accepting the existence of Israel. If there was any doubt, multiple times since, Hamas officials, including the head of Hamas, in interviews have over and over pointed out that, of course, the aim of Hamas remains the total destruction of the state of Israel and its embracement by an Islamist state through Hamas. Therefore, whatever positive signs there may or may not have been in the statement of 2017, the actions speak in this case much louder than the words. Furthermore, violence is what Hamas does. This is what it says in 1988. This is what it said in the statement of 2017. It calls it armed struggle. We at CEP call it terrorist actions that deliberately target civilians because it is seen as part of the fight, and there is no distinction in Hamas's mind between an Israeli child and an Israeli soldier in uniform. Please keep that in mind. Because it is a religious ideology, Hamas is not able to accept other Palestinian factions on its side. The participation of Hamas in the election in 2006 was a, mind you, smart political maneuver, but it was a tactical maneuver. In 2007, it became very clear on how Hamas intends to run the Gaza Strip, where it won a majority of the seats, by pushing out Fatah, i.e. the PLO faction that was also part of the political structure in Gaza, not by asking them to leave, but by killing those who remained and pushing militarily out the rest. Hence, we are not looking at a democratically elected, somewhat legitimized ruler of Gaza. If you have an absolutist religious ideology with global ambitions, obviously you are looking for implementing the word of God, even though you infuse this with elements of Palestinian nationalism. However, that also means in its internal logic, you cannot have other Palestinian factions having different opinions to what you perceive God's opinion to be. Why is this a problem for Germany? I mean, I don't need to repeat. You've all seen what happened at Potsdamer Platz in Neukölln, at the Brandenburg Gate now numerous times. You've seen the demonstrations in Essen. We do have a very lively supporter and sympathizer network, both in Europe but also here in Germany, with quite detrimental, I would say, consequences, in particular for the safety and security of Jewish life in Germany. This also is part of Hamas's ideology. There is a statement, part of the fundamental statement 1988 reads, and I read the German here, aufgrund der Tatsache, dass jene Muslime, die sich an die Wege der über die ganze Welt verbreitenden islamistischen Widerstandsbewegung halten, Unterstützung für sie und ihre Standpunkte sammeln und danach streben, ihren Kampf zu verstärken, ist die Bewegung eine universelle Bewegung. So it defines the sympathizer and supporter networks outside the Palestinian territories as an integral part of what it calls the Islamic movement. Hamas, as you know, is the acronym for the Arab version of the Islamic resistance movement, which also means not only does it count on its sympathizers and supporters here in Germany to push for it its aims politically and to finance it. And the banning both of Samidun and Hamas is only the last in a litany over the last couple of years of network support structures that were banned. For example, in May 2021, the ANSA International Network was banned that purposefully collected money to transmit that to several terrorist organizations, including Al-Shabaab and Nusra Front, but also to Hamas. It's not only counting on this for money, but it also, in times of heightened tensions, as we are right now, as you're all aware, is very much calling on its supporter networks to do whatever they can to put out political pressure. This is why we have violence against the police forces to a certain extent here in Germany. This is why we have the Stars of David's on Jewish homes. This is all generating material that Hamas can use for its propaganda purposes. Hence, what happens here is very much part of the wider plan, because very clearly Hamas is not delusional enough to think that they would be able to defeat Israel militarily. Hence, the long strategic aim of this horrible situation that is going on at the moment is, of course, similar to what Hezbollah did in 2006, to overall win the propaganda war, push the PNA and other political factions into political oblivion once this is all over, and then hopefully regenerate its physical infrastructure after the degradation by the Israeli military that is ongoing. And if you have any questions on the specific legality of what Israel is doing, there is just a paper from NAFO that has been published a couple of days ago, which looks at the völkerrechtliche, the international legal situation on what is done and how it is done, and how Israel is trying its very best to keep to the rules of war and the Geneva Convention. Hence, since we have this active supporter network here in Germany, and since this is part of the overall Hamas operational capabilities, a few things should be undertaken with urgency. One is a diplomatic and sanctions push, and Kasra will talk a lot more in detail about the support that Iran has very clearly been affording to Hamas, not only as far as arms, ammunition, and technology is concerned, but also that as far as training and finance is concerned. I would like to highlight, of course, also the role of Qatar. Just a small reminder, Qatar just let the head of Hamas travel to Iran for consultations. So it's not an extradition order from him to leave the country. It is actually simply allowing him to travel while this conflict is going on. This is not a good behavior of a respected member of the international community, and we should not be under no illusion where Hamas stands. This is not the first time where Qatar stands. It's not the first time that Qatar seems to have an obvious problem with terrorist groups. As you may remember, there were discussion about financing of that came out of Qatar for Al-Qaeda. Then there was a discussion of financing coming out of Qatar for al-Nusra and the Islamic State. Then there was a discussion about the Qatari relationship with the Taliban, and now we have a discussion of the Qatari relationship with Hamas. I do understand that sometimes things can be missed. However, this seems to be an indicative series of misses that Qatar has undertaken. I understand it has currently an important role in the hostage negotiations, but once this is over with the hostage negotiations, one would have to speak very clearly with the Qatari leadership on this political maneuvering that it has done in this area, which to a certain extent also enabled Hamas. Of course, the argument is that all the money, the $30 million that Qatar transferred to the Gaza Strip per month, was intended for the employees of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But on the 8th of October, one day after the attack, a Hamas official in Lebanon at the Russian television, mind you, Russian television and in Arabic, so not really accessible immediately. However, he very much declared that in the last 2 years, Hamas was absolutely concentrating on preparing this attack while pretending to manage Gaza. Hence, there is, of course, more than a realistic chance that funds that have been flowing to pay the employees of Hamas in the Gaza Strip have actually been diverted. The other country which would need to be politically engaged, both by Germany because of its particular relationship, but also by the European Union, is, of course, Turkey. Here is where there is a central part of Hamas's infrastructure as far as companies is concerned. And you can read the details on our website, both in the Hamas report as well as some of the press statements that we have taken out, calling for targeting these companies. Now, legally speaking, of course, in Turkey, as well as, by the way, in Switzerland, Hamas is not considered a terror organization. This creates loopholes that undermine the effectiveness both of US as well of the existing EU sanction against Hamas as a terror organization, and allows Hamas indeed very openly to have a company system that augments the money it is receiving, not only from the supporters here, but also from Iran and Qatar. This is a weakness that Hamas has. It is a known problem set because Hamas is, as Al-Qaeda was until 2001, as the Islamic State was until 2019, a hierarchically structured, fully integrated terror organization, which means if you are targeting the central financial streams, you are strategically weakening the structure of Hamas as a whole. And these companies in Turkey, as well as the financial support from Qatar as well as Iran, are strategic income streams for the organization. Here in Germany, of course, we do have a little bit more to do after the banning of Hamas and Samidun. I always call these banning orders a arms race. Obviously, the supporters and sympathizers of Hamas who are financing or collecting finances for Hamas here in Germany are not going to stop because there's a banning order now. They're going to reorganize. Hence, we should have a discussion, something that we could have had on many occasions in the past, but I just want to push that point one more time, on the way that we are structuring our counterterrorism financing provisions in Article 89 of the Criminal Code of Germany, where we force prosecutors to connect every specific sum of money to a specific terrorist action rather than to a specific terrorist group. So if this would be combined with paragraph 120, Article 129 of the Criminal Code, A and B, i.e. support for terrorism organizations, we would have a much broader and easier way not only to investigate but also to prosecute terrorism financing in Germany. By the way, if you've seen the FATF mutual evaluation report of Germany, we had a 1% success rate in prosecuting terrorism financing at the height of terrorist activity in Germany between 2014 and 16, when more than 1,000 Germans went to the Islamic State. And you would think this would be the time that terrorism financing is successfully prosecuted in Germany. We had 600 prosecutions and 6 convictions. So I think we can do better if we are adjusting slightly our legal framework. The same goes for the ability or the inability of the Domestic Intelligence Service, for the BFV as well as the LFVs, because the legal framework is exactly the same, in investigating or collecting and analyzing financial information on extremist groups that are already Beobachtungsobjekt, that are named in the public reports of the BFV and the LFVs, because according to Article 8A of the BFV, law, and same formulation in all of the laws of the LFVs as well, the BFV is not allowed to ask any bank or collect systematically any financial information on an extremist group that is a Beobachtungsobjekt unless this group openly supports or calls for violence. This is not a hard hurdle for terrorism finances to overcome, to simply not openly call for violence on its websites or in its public events, and therefore shield entirely his or her finances from scrutiny by the BFV and the LFV very effectively. And hence here too, it would be necessary to contemplate whether this difference between financial investigations only against groups that are perpetrating violence and are extremist, and no financial investigations against groups that are purposefully, hence their Beobachtungsobjekt, purposefully and sustainably working to undermine the FDGO, the Freiheitlich-Demokratische Grundordnung, whether this is fit for purpose in the current situation. Final point. There is a shiny new legal framework that Germany has given itself with the Network Enforcement Act, Netzwerkdurchsetzungsgesetz, NetzDG, a couple of years ago, now augmented and supported by 2 European legal provisions, the Terrorism Content Online Directive, as well as the new Digital Services Act. All of these are mechanisms through which the platforms, whether it's social media or messenger services, can be held to account if they're failing us. And I don't think I tell you something particularly shocking, that these platforms have not been able to effectively moderate the content, neither here in Germany nor anywhere else. And they have allowed a lot of Hamas propaganda to be streamed directly into the homes and on the mobile phones and computers of people here in Germany, which exacerbates the situation. Hence, the European Commission has already started several investigations, according to the DSA, against those platforms. There is an opportunity in the Netzwerkdurchsetzungsgesetz to do the same here in Germany, and this should be a priority subject. If we think that Hamas propaganda is a problem and is exacerbating hatred and societal division, which it clearly does. Again, please just have a look at what happens in Neukölln on a practically weekly basis, or what was called for in Essen when they called for the establishment of a caliphate over the last weekend. Then I would say the platforms can and should be doing much better. My organization has been working on the technical aspects for many years already. This is not a technical issue. This is not a legal issue. This is simply a commercial decision of the platforms not to focus on this issue. And over and over and over again, to put out wonderful statements on how much they're doing, while not actually doing very much concrete. Just as a very concrete reminder, and I'm really still amazed that that hasn't caused much of an uproar, when Hamas said they may be live streaming the killing of the hostages, all of the platforms unisono said, we cannot prevent this. This is 4 years after the Christchurch massacre. This is 3 years after the Christchurch call for action, where all of the major platforms were on the stage with not one, but several heads of states promising to do better. Just a reminder, Christchurch massacre was a right-wing extremist shooting up a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, and live streaming this. And the platforms promised they would be better next time. And as soon as there is even an announcement that there may be a next time, all the platforms saying, whoa, hold on, it's only 4 years. We haven't been really developing those technical tools. We cannot really prevent this, which means there's nothing that the platform have really seriously in technical terms done since 2019 to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And this time they know it's going to happen, and still they say they can't prevent it. I find this a point warranting further discussion, including under the provisions of NetzDG, which says if you systematically violate the law, we are levying a quite serious fine against you from the federal government of Germany. Okay, this is for my opening statement, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this deep insight in the Genesis ideology and structures of Hamas, and very interesting for me, at least, to hear that there are maybe a couple of points we can do better here in Germany to prevent from terrorism. My suggestion is that Mr. Arabi gives our small input before we start the question round. Okay? Okay, the floor is yours, Mr. Arabi.
Thank you very much for hosting this really important and timely session. So I want to start by, first of all, making the point that my research specialism is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, and if you speak with other IRGC specialists, they will tell you that it is simply inconceivable that the IRGC, the Islamic Republic of Iran, was not aware of the October 7th terrorist attacks. Not only did the IRGC have a green lighting role, but it would have been involved at the strategic planning level for an attack of this scale. So I want to take a step back and explain to you what the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is, how it operates, its ties to Hamas, and also looking at the homegrown threat here in Germany. So first of all, to begin with, it's important to highlight that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, is not a conventional armed force. It started off as an Islamist militia, and it has maintained that militia identity through the way it behaves. So really, the IRGC itself identifies itself as an ideological organization. It operates no differently to other prescribed terrorist entities, from Sunni Islamist extremist groups like ISIS Al-Qaeda to Hezbollah, which it created. So the IRGC has, like these groups, a formal program of ideological indoctrination that teaches its recruits and their families to not only to wage jihad, armed jihad, against Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians on the basis that, quote, they have unacceptable faith and must either convert to Islam or be killed. For Iranians who oppose the Islamic Republic, oppose the regime, the IRGC teaches its recruits to torture these individuals prior to their execution on the basis that they are muharebs, on the basis, in Islamic terms, under Islamic Sharia, they are waging war against God. So the IRGC's ideology is a violent, hardline Islamist extremist ideology, and if we look at the way it behaves, its modus operandi is no different to other terrorist organizations. Terrorisms, hijackings, hostage takings, that really is the DNA of the IRGC. Now, as well as conducting direct terrorist attacks, including plots in European soil, as well as conducting and nurturing homegrown Shia radicalization, homegrown Shia extremism on our European borders, the IRGC, as part of it, the way it behaves, has created and nurtured an extensive network of terrorist militia actors. Some of these groups it created. Some of these groups we call, on the spectrum of IRGC militias, IRGC manufactured groups. These are groups like Hezbollah, where the IRGC directly created, wrote its charter, and Hezbollah has embraced the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic as the leader of the Islamic world, as God's representative on earth. Other groups it has co-opted, like Hamas, and there is my entry point to start and talk and unpack this relationship between the IRGC and Hamas. The relationship between the Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, and Hamas started to really flourish in the early 1990s, where we saw that Israel expelled Hamas into Lebanon, and we saw Hamas militants being trained at the Hezbollah University. These are trainings for suicide bombings, etc. But we also had a contingent of Hamas militants being sent to Tehran to undergo missile training by the so-called godfather of the Iranian ballistic missile program, IRGC commander Tehrani Moghaddam. More recently, we have seen in 2021 Hamas become even more important in the so-called axis of resistance. The axis of resistance is the term the Islamic Revolutionary Guard refers to, the Islamic Republic refers to its network of proxy and militia actors, all of whom operate as terrorist organizations. So in 2021, we saw Hamas and Hezbollah and the IRGC establish a joint command room in south of Lebanon to conduct and cooperate and coordinate more closely for attacks against Israel. Let me make this very clear from the offset. The IRGC's official policy is to eradicate the state of Israel. The IRGC is the most anti-Semitic organization in the world. And it has established this network of proxy and militia actors with the purpose of achieving this objective. And it sees October 7th through this light. And I can explain the ideological background to that as well. The view is that the IRGC is the military vehicle to facilitate the return of the 12th divinely ordained Shia Imam, Imam Mahdi, the hidden Imam. The hidden Imam, Shia Muslims believe, was withdrawn into a miraculous state of disappearance in 874 AD. He will return, but prior to his return, according to the indoctrination the IRGC clerics are teaching their recruits, there are barriers to his return, and the IRGC has to remove these barriers. Since 2009, they have been communicating and teaching their recruits that the biggest barrier to the hidden Imam's return is Israel's existence. And they have been indoctrinating not only their own men and their families, but also their militia groups as well. Now, as well as the role in IRGC hard power, so the IRGC is the principal supporter of Hamas militarily, logistically, and financially. It has also, through its soft power organizations, provided Hamas support for recruitment, radicalization, even though their ideology, Hamas is a Sunni Islamist extremist group, as Hans very eloquently established. But the IRGC has supported that role for recruitment and radicalization. Not only that, it has played a key role in the planning of the reconstruction of Gaza. IRGC Quds Force commanders have done this. Now, this is a model that they, from their view, sophisticated and to their maximum effect in the south of Lebanon. In the south of Lebanon, after the 33-day war, after 2006, the IRGC Quds Force created the Reconstruction Committee for Lebanon. The Reconstruction Committee for Lebanon was headed by IRGC Quds Force commander, engineer Hassan Shateri. Hassan Shateri states openly in his memoirs that they went to southern Lebanon. They would create schools, mosques, centres, football academies, firstly with the goal of recruiting and radicalising young boys for Hezbollah, but also reconstructing destroyed buildings after the 33-day war. As I said, schools, hospitals, mosques, ordinary homes, with the sole purpose of storing missiles for Hezbollah, making it extremely difficult for Israel to target Hezbollah positions, and also making it extremely difficult for Israel to identify and target these positions with minimal cost to civilian life. So it's incorporating psychological warfare as part of that, and we're seeing that today. In Gaza in 2008, they sought to replicate this model in Gaza through the creation of the Reconstruction Committee for Gaza. Now, Gaza is very different to southern Lebanon. The Iranian regime does not have the same access to Gaza. However, the IRGC Quds Force, although they couldn't deploy their bulldozers, although they couldn't deploy their engineers directly there, they played a key strategic planning role in reconstructing buildings in Gaza after the 2008 war, with the sole purpose of storing Hamas missiles. Now, all of this is to paint a picture to really highlight that as part of the axis of resistance, the IRGC controls that. Now, this isn't to say that the IRGC has full command and control over Hamas. It does when it comes to military and militant terrorist attacks, when it comes to the Hezbollah. Obviously, it also has to consider domestic context there as well. However, Hamas has become extremely important, a key player in the IRGC's so-called axis of resistance. If we go back as well, we see that recent structural changes, and I was here in April last year, and I was talking about this, the recent structural changes to the IRGC's doctrine, to the IRGC's personnel, all pointed to the IRGC moving towards confrontation with Israel. It was preparing and moving towards this confrontation. So the idea that the October 7th attack would have happened without the green light of the IRGC, without the strategic coordination and planning of the IRGC is simply inconceivable. And I'm happy to answer any questions in relation to that. Right now, we see that the IRGC has created different stages. It believes it is controlling the path of escalation. It has provided a roadmap for escalation, saying that the second stage of this attack will be a multi-front attack from other members of the axis of resistance. Now, to bring it back very quickly to why this matters in Germany, we have seen that as well as I said, IRGC targeting and creating terrorism against the state of Israel, it has also, and it is proactively seeking to conduct terror plots against not only Israeli citizens, but members of the Jewish community, not only in the Middle East, but also in Europe. And it is doing this by nurturing homegrown Islamist extremism, homegrown IRGC radicalization, using tactics and methods identical to the likes of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. However, whereas ISIS and Al-Qaeda are prescribed terrorist organizations, the current sanctions regime in Europe on the IRGC does not prohibit the IRGC's ability to disseminate jihadi propaganda. It does not prohibit the IRGC's ability to conduct cultural and so-called soft power operations in Europe. Just yesterday, we exposed one of these soft power operations. 5 German universities have an official collaboration with what we revealed for the first time, an university in Iran that is extensively affiliated with the IRGC, that is extensively affiliated with the IRGC Quds. The head of this university, President Nabab himself, is a senior IRGC member, one of the heads of the ideological indoctrination program, which calls for armed jihad against Jews. Nabab has personally struck deals and agreements with the principals of German universities. This university that we've exposed is not only extensively affiliated with the IRGC, it is also extensively affiliated with Hezbollah. They have hosted Naim Qassem, Hezbollah's deputy terror chief, on their premises. And to top this all off, it has officially the university that has ties and collaborations with German universities, where we've seen delegations from Germany and delegations from this university visit here in Berlin and other German cities, has officially advocated for terrorist attacks against Israel and has officially endorsed Hamas terrorist attacks against Israel. So the IRGC has an operation, a soft power operation in Germany, and all of these efforts are geared towards nurturing homegrown Islamist extremism. So if I go on to what we can do next, the first thing, directly to this point, is target these networks in Germany. So we've got the Islamic Center of Hamburg, which, by the way, we have now proven with hard evidence that it has ties to this IRGC Hezbollah-affiliated university in Iran. So there's your IRGC link. The former head of the Islamic Center of Hamburg, Ayatollah Ramazani Gilani, was at the time that he was head of president of Islamic Center Hamburg, a board member of URD, this Hezbollah IRGC-affiliated university. So the first thing is target these networks. URD, this Iranian university which has these German partnerships, needs to be sanctioned immediately. The German government, and I think parliamentarians are here, we had a similar situation in the UK. And after our expose, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, opened an urgent investigation into university collaborations with sanctioned entities in Iran. URD isn't sanctioned in Germany. So this requires an urgent investigation. I would urge members of parliament to call on the German government to open an urgent investigation on this, as well as this sanction URD. In addition to this, the IRGC needs to be prescribed as a terrorist organisation. As I said, the current sanctions regime does not prohibit the IRGC's ability to disseminate jihadi propaganda. Prescription would change that. It would provide governments, tech companies, civil society groups with a full mandate to prohibit any activity relating to the IRGC, including propaganda activity. On that point as well, it would equip our local communities, our local schools, our local police force with the right tools to prevent against Shia radicalization, IRGC radicalization in Germany. These are tools that they currently do not have because the focus of these prevent programs in Germany, in the UK, in the European Union are exclusively focused on Salafi jihadism. The third point in relation to what the IRGC is doing in the region is about re-establishing deterrence. How do you re-establish deterrence? The IRGC believes that, and the regime in Iran more broadly believes, that the US does not want to impose direct consequences on Tehran. It has calculated that at best, the US at most will target IRGC proxy positions in Syria. The US and its allies, including Germany, have to find a way of changing this calculus. And that means to do this, they have to take back control of this roadmap of escalation and make it very clear to the IRGC that if this continues, its assets inside of Iran are legitimate targets. And let me make this very clear. As an Iranian as an Iranian diaspora member as well, targeting IRGC assets in Iran is not an attack on Iran. It is not an attack on the Iranian people. It is targeting the very asset. It is targeting the very entity that is murdering the Iranian people on the streets of Iran. The Iranian people and the Israeli people share a common enemy. There is an existential threat to both of these people, and that is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the regime in Iran more broadly. I'll leave it there for now, and then happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Arabi, for this insight. Unfortunately, I think it is not the very first time we in Germany have been a little bit naive on how to consider and to evaluate risk emerging from IRGC. But I think with so much input, there are many questions. So I'm opening a little bit to who wants to start. Ja, bitte.
My name is Sebastian Engelbrecht. I'm a correspondent for Deutschlandfunk in Berlin. One question to Mr. Schindler. What do you know about the network of Hamas itself in Europe, about its institutions and about the construction of this network inside Europe and mainly inside Germany?
Right, there are two classes of networks, right? So the ones that, of course, I think should be disrupted immediately, and there are tools that are outlined in order to make this more effectively, is the financial support networks. This is really a key area in which Hamas collects money, right? There are pots of where Hamas gets money from. Of course, the biggest until very recently, for obvious reasons, was anything that goes on in Gaza. Everything, any money, any economic activity was taxed, in inverted commas, by Hamas. Then we had the state support that Kasra pointed out. I pointed towards Qatar as a second major source of income. And then we have companies. Companies operate in jurisdictions, best in jurisdictions where Hamas is, of course, not considered a terrorist organization. So look towards Switzerland, look towards Turkey for the appropriate targets. But as far as the misuse of the charitable sector is concerned, i.e. collecting money for ostensibly charitable purposes, but actually collecting this for Hamas operational activities, that is one aspect of the network. The other aspect is its supporter scene, which it uses very skillfully through its propaganda to put public pressure on governments both in the region but also here in Germany and in Europe. And that is the networks that are organizing. These are not spontaneous demonstrations in Essen. These are not spontaneous demonstrations here in Neukölln. So we do have this bifurcation of actual quite professional terrorism financing structures and a looser but still very relevant supporter network structure that Hamas can call at any point on to stage these demonstrations. And I would say if the pressure gets significant on Hamas in the Gaza Strip, I would not exclude the possibility that Hamas may want to call on its supporters to also conduct attacks outside the region. There's already been, on the 13th of October, a global day of rage that Hamas had officially announced. Day of Rage is a terminology from the Intifada, which means a day in which the entire Palestinian community was supposed to resist Israel. That, however, was a clear call beyond the region to actually conduct violence and put political pressure on the government. So this is a relevant issue to address. Harder than the financial stuff. Hence, my argument is let's start with the financial support. This is something that is doable. This is something that we have done. We've not yet have the ideal legal instruments, as I pointed out, i.e. making it very unnecessarily, extremely hard for our security services to actually investigate and then prosecute these kind of networks. Hence, the long distance between one banning order to the next banning order. We can do this more effectively, and that is something we should start now.
Thank you very much. Inzwischen ist gerade eingetroffen der Gesandte der israelischen Botschaft, Herr Zagui. I'm very delighted to welcome Mr. Zagui, Minister of the Israeli Embassy, and maybe you accept, before we continue with our questions, that Mr. Zagui gives a very, very short statement on the situation and the evaluation by Israel.
Thank you. Do you hear me well? Yeah, good. So good morning everyone, and thank you for having me. We are now exactly 1 month since the barbaric terror attack on the southern Israel by Hamas, and we are a week and 2 days more or less since Israel has started its ground operation, and we know very well, I think, around this table that when you are attacked by terrorists, you have to A, defend yourself, B, make sure that it doesn't happen again. So we are exactly doing that now. After this war, we will definitely have to
look introspectively and see what we have done wrong in preparing ourselves for such an attack and not in absorbing and also reacting a bit faster maybe, but this will stay for the day after. At this stage, we have to make sure that we find as much terrorists as we can in order to remove them from the scene, to make sure that they cannot threaten us again. Good morning. Second, we have to make sure that there are around 240 plus abductees, hostages in the hands of Hamas. Most of them Israelis. There are a few that are not, but most of them Israelis. So we have to make sure that all of them, including the non-Israelis, all of them return safely home. And third, our third mission is to rebuild the communities that were affected during this attack in October 7th, and to make sure that they feel safe enough that even if their houses are being rebuilt, that they actually can get in the houses because they feel that they are secure this time and that such an attack cannot happen again. We are now inside Gaza. We have pretty encircled the Gaza city, which is on the central north part of the Gaza Strip. And we also have divided to two halves Gaza, militarily speaking. And our forces are getting into Gaza City in order to, as I said before, to find those terrorists, both their leaders and their fighters, and to bring them to justice. If they surrender, we'll take them as they are there. If not, we will have to take them out of the holes and tunnels they are hiding in. But we are doing, I think, what exactly every single other Western country that I know would have done and have done in the past when was attacked by terrorists. And even when you see quantitatively the numbers of people affected by this, I'm talking now about civilians, which is always a human tragedy. Whenever civilians are being affected by a war, whichever side they are, there is an element of tragedy, and we are all in pain for that. But even then, if you check numbers, I would invite you to compare with every single war against terrorism, from those conducted by the US justifiably and its coalition against Al-Qaeda, and later on with Islamic State. And if you go back in history, in any conflict in which civilians were affected. So we make the impossible from our side not to hit civilians. Not an easy job, because our enemies are embedded within civilians. Just yesterday, I saw a couple of video clips in which you see, I think it was about 500 rockets found in a youth center inside in the outskirts of Gaza City. And we know it's not a new practice, but they are shooting rockets into our cities from within, next to mosques or inside mosques, from a youth center, from a pool we discovered yesterday next to a pool that was serving kids in Gaza, kindergartens, schools, UNRWA facilities, and that makes our mission a bit tougher, but we are trying our best. But one thing is pretty sure, I can assure you, the people of Israel are united around this mission to annihilate, to eliminate the threat of Hamas, to dismantle it, and hopefully the day after, because everybody's talking about the sceneries for the day after, we will have to deal with Gaza in a different way. All the international community, the regional partners, the countries in the region, the Arab countries, and us, Israel as well. And also the Palestinians themselves. Palestinians many times complain that they are not given A, they are not given B. I think they were given a lot of opportunities to take ownership on their destiny. They have failed once and again. I hope that one day they can, for their sake, but also for our sake, because we're neighbors and we are intertwined in many ways. They assume their responsibility to manage their society in a way that would inspire some more confidence in us Israelis and would allow us to find political solutions. But at this stage, we're in square one. We need security, the basic need of any human being, and we will get it. We are united behind the mission. The day after, as you know as well, we'll know to investigate ourselves. We'll know to demand from our politicians and leaders to take responsibility on their mistakes. But now we are pretty much all together, running to the front lines to fight, running within Israeli territory to help and assist our fellow countrymen that left their houses in the southern part of Israel. Also helping those citizens in the northern part of Israel. You know, we have Hezbollah in the north, who are much more, who are stronger and much more dangerous than Hamas in the potential to harm us Israelis. But I think now this time we are ready also for any surprise coming from the north. So this is more or less the situation, and any question you have, I'd be happy to answer. And again, thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. I mean, we know that we have your support. We feel it. We will need it even for the long run, because this fight against terror doesn't finish in one day, 1 week, or 1 month. It will be a very long one, and we will need the help and support of our friends. We will fight ourselves, but we need the political and diplomatic umbrella, and we have it as for now. We will still need it in the medium and long run, and we expect our friends, especially Germany, to stand next to us, and we see that this is happening, and we appreciate that, and we thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sagui, for this statement. Further questions? Mr. Schindler, you mentioned, sorry, yes, please.
Can you hear me? Yes. Uscheudino La Stampa, Italy. Sorry. Do you hope to win this war to terror, and how do you define victory?
Good question. I think that my definition of not Israel's definition, my definition of a victory would be to see the citizens of our communities in the south going back to their homes, all of them, or at least most of them. That, from my perspective, would mean that we have won, because they would feel that they are secure. They will have the confidence to live so close to Gaza. To make sure that it's actually a real victory, we will need to have them over there safe for a long time ahead, and this would actually will show us or prove us that we actually won this war. But defeating terror, and there are some experts next to me here more than I am. It's not something that you can define here and now, and it's a very long mission. We will need perseverance. We will need, at the same time that we fight terror, also to deal with other aspects in the region. Of course, to confront those who enhance terror in the region, Iranians and others, but also to go hand in hand with those in the region that actually want a better future and to have their societies, let's say, emulate the positive aspects of, let's call it, the Western world. And there are some countries in the region that definitely want that. I said it before, I really hope that at a certain point the Palestinians will be ready to go to that horizon together with us and our neighbors who want to engage in progress for their societies and not in warfare for many years ahead. So this is something we will not be able to define it very properly, very accurately in the short run. I would say that some signs would be that we would see that most of Hamas would be decimated militarily, its leaders either killed or escaping somewhere or accepted by maybe a certain third country because of a certain agreement that would enhance their surrender. And hopefully the Palestinians having a different system there, well, more than hopefully. If they will not have a different system, we will not allow the actual system to keep on being there. I mean, Hamas will not be anymore the leading factor in any surrounding territory to Israel, whether it's the West Bank or Gaza. And how you make it possible? A, militarily, and B, politically. So we have to combine both. At this stage, it's the military stage. In the future, I think from time to time, we will have to be more involved militarily from time to time, because we know that our Palestinians have proved not to be effective in ruling their own territory, especially security-wise. And from time to time, we need to be more active and not let an enemy, a monster like this, to grow in such a way and become a threat to us.
Ja, bitte. Joe Weingarten, Social Democrats in the Bundestag. Concerning what you said, the Palestinian Authority, as weak as it is, President Abbas has said he is able and under some circumstances willing to govern the Gaza Strip. Do you think this is realistic?
If we look at the past, in 2005, when we left Gaza until the last centimeter, there were 2 years of the Palestinian Authority ruling of Gaza, and then they were thrown up literally and otherwise from balconies and high buildings in Gaza, and Hamas took over. Some say that if not because of Israel, even in the West Bank nowadays, we would have a Hamas government or administration. So at this moment, I think it will be difficult for him to do it if you just implant him at this moment in Gaza. After this war, I think the conditions could be better, because his rival internally in the within Palestinian society, which is Hamas, in parentheses, Muslim Brotherhood, would be in different shape than it is now. So it might be easier, but the issue is not if you rule today or in the next week, but for the long run. And I think that if the Palestinians want to have functional government, they need to own it. So I don't have a clear answer to you. I can tell you one thing: us, Israel, we cannot trust the Palestinian Authority to keep the security of our citizens. So this will be something that we will have to take on ourselves for a long time, unless somebody else takes it. If international community or regional actors say, stay aside, we will do it for you, maybe we'll have to consider such a thing. If the Palestinians say so, we will not trust them, not because they will not have the will. I hope they will have the will, but they will not have the ability, not in the short run. So for a certain period of time, I guess we'll have to be responsible on the security envelope, let's call it. On the governing side and administrative side, it's something that we will have to be dealing with our neighbors, including the Palestinians, and see how Gaza could be managed. Again, we are mostly now busy in today's scenario, not so much in the day after. I know it's something that should be thought about, and there are some people that are doing so in some rooms, I guess. But we are now mostly focused on the two things. One, trying to win it, as I was asked before, in Gaza, and secondly, to make sure that Hezbollah stays aside and doesn't make a mistake and gets into this as well. And by the way, that's another issue we'll have to deal the day after, how we deal with Hezbollah, because are we staying the same with the same modus vivendi we had with Hamas, knowing that there's an enemy who is becoming stronger and stronger and hates you and wants to annihilate you, and then you just trust your deterrence, and then being surprised by this enemy, or you maybe try to change the reality to make it safer for you and your citizens. So this is another challenge we'll have to deal with the day after.
Im Moment sehe ich keine. Da, bitte.
Susanne Stephan, Focus Magazine. What you are telling us seems a bit vague still, and I wonder how realistic it might be that the UN helps for a transitory period to uphold security after the war. In the last years, UNRWA and UN were not very successful in controlling Hamas in Gaza. So what's your thoughts about this? And overall, how long would you expect Israel staying in Gaza? Like for 1 year, 2 years? What might be realistic?
Regarding the second question, I still don't have a clear answer for that. We are now focused on defeating Hamas and bringing back our abductees safely. So this is the main focus at this stage. Regarding the first question, look, the UN has not been successful. Look, put aside Hamas. Syria. What exactly was the effect of the UN on situation in Syria, in Ukraine? So many fronts. So we have no high expectations from the UN. We are used to see resolution after resolution criticizing the democratic state of Israel instead of dealing with some small problems out there. And some other countries that are having some issues, not mentioned Iran and North Korea and Syria and Russia and China, etc., etc., etc. So many countries that you see almost no resolution against them. Against Russia, there was one resolution during the Ukraine war, but somehow they find every Monday and Thursday the time to get another resolution against the state of Israel. So we have no expectations from UN whatsoever. We do have partners, both in the region, moderate partners that when they are not busy in bashing Israel, they actually can be conducive and productive. And definitely the US and Europe could be, in some other countries that could be effective in any mechanism maybe in the future, from security to finding other type of solutions to managing things in Gaza. But again, the most from our perspective, we are now focused on succeeding in our mission, and no ceasefires expected. You can have here and there some pause in order to allow humanitarian supplies get in, but at this stage we are focused in the fighting and in succeeding in this mission, and we hope to bring an end to Hamas hostilities towards Israel as fast as we can. And again, it will be an ongoing process. We have no illusions, but we need to do most of the work in the very short run, and then from then on we can start thinking about the scenarios of the day after.
I'm Werner Sonner. I'm a former ARD correspondent, and I spent the week leading up to the war in Israel, and also traveled the West Bank, and I also saw the beginning of the war in Israel there. And while traveling the West Bank, it became obvious again and again that the PLO does not have any support, or it's losing extremely support among the people in the West Bank. And I'm sorry, and I'm wondering, how long do you want to keep up the illusion that the PLO is an efficient and willing partner for Israel and also for Germany? And how can you think for 1 minute that the PLO could be ready and able to rule in Gaza?
If we follow the facts on the ground, I cannot disagree with you. Many times we are thinking, what are the alternatives? But and they're not. We don't see excellent alternatives on the table, and we are just not taking them. Ideally, at a certain point, and I hope after Abu Mazen is not young anymore, and at a certain point he might retire. We hope that whoever comes after, we would actually grab the opportunity and try to prove to the world, leave aside Israel, but also Israel, mainly Israel, because we are their immediate neighbors, that they can actually be effective and functional and not become another dysfunctional country in the region. There are too many of them. I have no big illusions, but I have a few of them. I have some illusion. Because I think at the end of the day, many of the Palestinians through the years were living next to us, and I think they were exposed a bit to a different system that, as dysfunctional as it could be seen sometimes, works not badly. Also, again, the other alternatives are so bad that I hope that at a certain point they make the right decisions for themselves, not as a favor for us. But to tell you that I'm super confident, I'm not. But I am a little bit optimistic because a new leadership could be maybe more responsible. I'm not saying they would love us more than Abu Mazen loves us, but again, they don't need to love us, and they need to love their own. As Golda Meir once said, they need to love their kids more than they hate us. And I'm hopeful that this could happen at a certain point. But at the same time, if you do now a democratic election in the West Bank, probably Hamas will win. So it's not easy choices. Ideally, you create a system, a governing system that would allow the society to have a better economic situation, to keep streets more or less safe and not anarchic as they are now. And once the people see that there's something to live for, they will focus on that and not in finding someone who is guilty for the situation. Historically, you don't see that progression as I'm describing now, but I hope things improve at a certain point. New leadership could be a chance for a turnaround. We will have to help them. Neighbors and others in the international community. We have been doing that for since 1993, since the Oslo Accords were signed, trying our best, making some mistakes on the way for sure. Until now we have failed, definitely. It's a failure. The project has failed. When I'm looking at the alternatives, I still would like, me personally, I would try to give it another chance with a new leadership, and maybe after what's happening now in Gaza, maybe it could be a kind of a reset. Otherwise, any other alternative is not great, definitely. And I don't have good answers now as what can be done in order to make sure that we go the right way, the right path.
So I have a question that's from the online chat. You see the name Yossi Lemkovitz. He's from European Jewish Press. He asked, is the IRGC has not been put on the EU list of terror organizations yet? Isn't it a good time to do that now?
Well, the answer is yes, but then we have to take a step back and say, is there really the political will in the European Union, and is the European Union the best mechanism to prescribe the IRGC, given the imminent terror threat the IRGC poses to Germany, to Britain? in an ideal world, we would go via the European Union and there would be unanimous support to get the IRGC prescribed. But given the fact that the European Union still distinguishes between the military and the political arm of Hezbollah, I'm not optimistic. I think Joseph Borrell has made it very clear, contrary to members of the European Parliament, the elected members of the European Union Parliament, that he does not believe the IRGC should be prescribed. So then the question becomes, okay, what mechanisms do we have in place to get the IRGC prescribed? Does it pose a serious national security threat? The answer to does it pose a serious national security threat is yes. Is it active in Germany? Is it active in Britain? In my case, yes, the answer is to that. We know that the IRGC is conducting operations in German soil. We know that they're conducting surveillance. We know that they're producing a list of Jewish targets across Europe. They have even conducted surveillance for terrorist plots against Jewish kindergartens in Germany. So really then, this becomes a question of what mechanisms do we have in place? In England, for example, we exposed this 2 months ago. The Islamic Students Association of Britain and Europe hosted 8 senior IRGC commanders where they propagated and glorified IRGC terrorism, where they promoted extreme anti-Semitism and called on British Muslim students and European students to join their so-called apocalyptic army to, quote, end the lives of Jews worldwide. The IRGC poses a serious national security threat, and from my perspective, first of all, before my perspective, this threat is directed not only to German citizens, of course, but particularly members of the Jewish community and the Iranian diaspora community. From my perspective, this takes the IRGC over the threshold where this becomes not a foreign policy issue, but this is an issue of homeland security and should be dealt by the Interior Ministry. The Interior Ministry can apply the same copy-paste methods that it used to prescribe Hezbollah in Germany, that the Home Office used to prescribe Hezbollah in Britain, and that should be applied to the IRGC. If Hezbollah is on the terrorist list, if Hezbollah has been prescribed in Germany, if Hezbollah has been prescribed in its entirety in the UK, then the IRGC, which created Hezbollah, which wrote the Hezbollah Charter, which is its principal supporter ideologically, militarily, financially, and in terms of armaments, must be on the list too. Really, and I say this again, both with my IRGC specialist hat, but also as a member of the Iranian diaspora community, our community here, I know, and I really mean this, does not feel safe from the threat of IRGC terrorism. And I know, and I regularly communicate with the Jewish community, and they feel the same, and rightly so. The IRGC is active on German soil. It's directly seeking to conduct terrorist plots against Jewish and Iranian targets in Germany, in Britain, and therefore the Interior Ministry, in my view, can do this. How can the German parliamentarians help in this regard? And I think the German parliamentarians, by the way, have been fantastic. Similar to the European Union parliamentarians and the British members of parliament, they're all on the same page on this. I think early day motions, non-binding agreements that can be non-binding resolutions that can be passed in the German Bundestag, in the British Parliament, can apply pressure on the governments to move on this issue and take it seriously and urgently. But first and foremost, as I said, this should be treated as an Interior Ministry issue, not a Ministry of Foreign Affairs topic.
Thank you very much. A very quick one, because at 9 o'clock, I'm sorry, we have to...
One question to our Israeli friend. How do you see the future of the relationship between Israel and the Arab world, given the fact that, of course, right now it had to be expected. You see a lot of lip service for the Palestinian cause in the Arab world. But how about the future of the Abraham Accords and the relationship to Saudi Arabia?
I'm very optimistic. I think the future over there is bright. There are a few countries in the region that have taken a strategic decision to make the life of the citizens better. As simple as that. Now, are they becoming democratic the next moment? Not yet. But they do want to improve their economies, their societies, the daily life of the citizens, and they understand that one good way of doing it is to partner with the those in the region that have the same agenda, and Israel has the same agenda as them in that perspective. Also, it provides, in parentheses, a certain umbrella vis-à-vis Iran, as you can imagine. But the main strategic turning point has been taken by them, including Saudi Arabia, I think. So I'm optimistic. I think it will happen rather sooner than later.
Okay, I'm afraid we are running out of time. Unfortunately, I'm sure there are many questions open. Whoever thought that there is a local war in Gaza Strip was wrong. And I think I've learned this morning, Mr. Schindler, Mr. Arabi, that it's much more than a local problem and local military conflict. And when it comes to its end, most probably problems are not solved in Germany, in UK, in the US, and for Iranian diaspora or for Jewish citizens. Hamas, Hezbollah, IRGC threaten our way of life, our democracies, tolerance, state of law, liberties, and maybe even our lives. So it will be a long mission, but be sure that Germany, its political parties which take responsibility, its citizens, will give you support as long as you need it. There's no limit. It's a long mission. It will take a long time to find solutions, but I'm sure it doesn't matter how long it takes, because the children of Palestine, of Israel, of any children deserve peace in the long run. And as a German, I know that history has shown we have had wars in Europe, so many, and so for so many years. At the end of the day, we have found a solution to live together in peace. And I'm sure this will happen in the Near East too. Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Schindler, Mr. Arabi, Mr. Sagui, and thank you for Mr. Bradley, Frau Rosenstein. Thank you so much. This was very, very interesting, and I've learned a lot, and let's hope the best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cronenberg, for your Gastfreundschaft. Just a question or an announcement to the journalists that are here. Kazra will be having a press conference from 1 p.m. until, from 12 to 1:30. If you're interested, it'll go more into detail. Feel free to come to me or to Ulrike, who's sitting here, and we'll give you the details about that press conference. And we have the possibility, if you want to, take a few moments even outside. If you're interested in talking to our guests today, feel free. We have another 20 minutes in this room for the journalists, otherwise outside the door in the lobby, etc. Okay. Thank you all for coming.